In this video, we're going to recreate Leave Me Alone by Fred again, focusing on the chorus section at 103 in Ableton. Step 1, we'll set up the project. Start a new project in Ableton, and we'll set the tempo to 174 beats per minute. Next, we'll change the key, and we'll select D minor. There's two main views in Ableton. We'll make sure we're in the arrangement view. If you're in the session view, you can swap out by selecting tab. You can also change views by selecting the icons up in the top right corner. Next, we'll delete audio track 3 and 4. Right-click, delete, right-click, delete. We'll then add in a third MIDI track. Right-click, insert MIDI track. Step 2, we're ready to build the drum track. Highlight the first 8 bars of MIDI 1. Right-click, insert empty MIDI clip. Next, head over to drums in the left-hand side. Drag over drum rack. We'll then right-click, rename, and we'll call this kick. For the drum rack, we'll need to load in our own samples. Head down to Packs, Core Library, Samples, One Shots, Drums, and then let's find kick. Scroll down until you see kick 909 ES. We'll drag this on to C1 of the drum kit. You can preview the sound by clicking the play icon on the bottom. Next, we'll add in a second drum rack on MIDI 2 for our snare and hi-hats. Go back to drums, drum rack, and we'll drag this onto track 2. Right-click, rename, and we'll call this drums. We'll highlight the first 8 bars again. Right-click, insert empty MIDI clip. We'll head back to our samples in Packs, scroll up, and we'll get rid of kick. We'll scroll down to snare, and let's find snare 707. We'll drag this to D1. Finally, we'll find our hi-hat, select hi-hat, and we'll use hi-hat close 2B, and we'll drag this to F# 1. Step 3, we'll program the beat. Select the MIDI editor in the bottom right-hand corner, and zoom in until you can see the first bar clearly. Select the little headphones icon so we can hear the notes as we play them in, and copy in the following notes. We'll then zoom out, bring the cursor all the way to the right-hand side, and we'll shorten this to a bar. This will repeat the pattern over the whole 8 bars. Let's have a listen. Next, we'll add in the hi-hat and snare. Select the drum track and zoom in until you can see the first bar clearly. Let's add in our snare on the following beats. Then we'll add in the hi-hat. Hold the cursor on the right-hand side and drag this all the way to the end of bar 1. Then on the right-hand side, select 1/16. We'll change this to 1/8. Next, right-click on the note and we'll select Chop Notes on Grid. We now have all of our hi-hats in place. Let's scroll back out and we'll drag this cursor over to repeat this section over the next 8 bars. Let's have a listen. To give the hi-hats more of a human touch, we can select the hi-hats and select Randomize. This will change the velocity of the notes to give it a bit more of a human feel. Let's have a listen. You can then change the velocity of each individual note by clicking on the note, selecting Command, and dragging up or down to change the velocity. This way you can create your own feel. Let's have a listen. Now you would have noticed that the hi-hats are a little bit too loud. We can adjust this by going back to the drum rack, selecting our sample for the hi-hat, and then reducing the volume on the bottom right-hand side. We'll do this as we're listening to the sample to get the sound exactly right. Let's have a listen. Step 3, we'll add in the bass track. On the third MIDI track, we'll select the first 8 bars, right-click, Insert MIDI clip. We'll then type in stretch in the search bar, select all, and drag the stretch bass to MIDI track 3. We'll then rename this, right-click, rename, and we'll call this bass. You can see the stretch bass is down in our left corner here, and we'll adjust some of these settings later. Firstly, we'll input the bass line. So we'll go over to the MIDI editor, then click Scale so we can see the notes that are in the scale of D minor. Copy in the following notes. Let's have a listen. Step 4. Let's make some quick edits to the sound. Select the bass in the bottom right hand corner and we'll lower the filter frequency to about 1.2. Next we'll increase the LFO rate to 1/8 and then reduce the LFO amount to about 10%. Let's have a listen. Next we'll add a compressor. Type in comp in the search bar and we'll drag over the compressor. Click the drop down menu and we'll select sidechain. Select audio input from kick. The sidechain compressor makes the bass quieter when the kick drum hits. This creates more room for the kick to be punchy without making the mix muddy. We'll play around with the sidechain compressor so you can hear the difference. Let's have a listen. Highlight the top 8 bars and select Command L, and this will keep the track looping as you're playing around with the sounds. You can hear that the sidechain compressor completely takes out the bass when the kick drum hits. We'll back this off now so it sounds good in the mix. Let's have a listen. Finally, we'll add in a saturator. Type in sat in the top corner and drag the saturator next to the compressor. In the drop-down menu, we'll select Bass Shaper. This is to add some character and warmth to the bass. We have a whole bunch of parameters that we can change, like the threshold, the clip, the amount of color, the drive, output, and dry and wet signal. We can play around with these to shape the sound of the bass. Let's have a listen. You can toggle on and off the saturator to hear the difference. You've created the bass and drum track from Fred Again's Leave Me Alone chorus. Give it a listen, compare it to the original, and feel free to experiment further. Well done!